Mike Johnson just opened a binder exposing how Maxine Waters turned a 3 8-cent mailer into a multi-million-dollar family business inside Congress. 38 cents. That's what it costs to print and mail an endorsement mailer in Los Angeles. Maxine Waters' campaign pays her daughter $1.20 for the same mailer, same paper, same postage, same ink. 3 times the price because the check goes to family. Mike Johnson did the math no one had done before. An 2-cent overpayment times 1 million mailers over 20 years. Then he opened the next tab in the binder, and the daughter was just the first family member on the payroll. By the time Johnson reached the last tab, the woman who told America to reclaim my time had spent 35 years reclaiming something else entirely. Smash that like button because you are about to watch a former teacher open a binder and grade a family business that has been operating inside the United States Congress for 35 years, and every family member gets an F. Mr. Speaker, I have been in this Congress since before you found religion and politics. I have survived Reagan, I have survived Gingrich, I have survived Trump twice, and I will survive whatever is in that little binder of yours. Maxine Waters sat at the witness table with the posture of a woman who had been sitting at tables in this building for 35 years and had never once been moved from one. She was 86 years old, 18 elections, 35 years. She had outlasted every speaker who had ever held the gavel, and she intended to outlast this one. You can grade me all you want, Mr. Speaker. I don't answer to you. I answer to my constituents, and they have reelected me 18 times. So bring your binder, bring your tabs, bring your little teacher act. I've buried better binders than that one. The House Ethics Committee hearing on campaign finance, compliance, and congressional nepotism had been convened after the June 2025 FEC fine of $68,000 for multiple campaign finance violations reopened public scrutiny of Waters' long-standing financial arrangements. Every network carried it live because Maxine Waters being questioned about money was not a hearing. It was the hearing that 35 years of questions had been building toward. The woman who answered to her constituents had, during 35 years of answering to them, paid her daughter more than $1.2 million in campaign funds, secured a $12 million federal financial rescue for a bank in which her husband held $350,000 in stock, installed her grandson as her chief of staff, and lived in a $4.5 million mansion in a neighborhood that was not in the district those constituents lived in. Her district, California's 43rd, included Watts, Inglewood, and South Los Angeles. Median household income, $36,000. Some of the most economically disadvantaged neighborhoods in Los Angeles. Some of the most economically disadvantaged neighborhoods in California. Speaker Mike Johnson sat at the center of the dais. Dark suit, red tie. The binder, thick, color-coded 5 tabs, each tab labeled with a name, sat on the desk. Representative, 18 elections. That's impressive. 35 years, that's a career. He opened the binder. Let me walk you through what that career paid for. He turned to the first tab. The tab was labeled Karen. Representative, your daughter, Karen Waters, runs a company called Progressive Connections. Since 2003, your campaign committee, Citizens for Waters, has paid Progressive Connections more than $1.2 million in fees. The payments are listed on your FEC filings as slate mailer management fees. He pulled a printed FEC summary, 20 years of payments listed by date and amount, $1.2 million over 20 years to your daughter for managing something called a slate mailer. Now, I want to make sure the committee understands what a slate mailer is because most Americans and most members of Congress have never heard of one. He explained it the way a teacher explains a concept, slowly, step by step, with the patience that is itself the weapon. A slate mailer is an endorsement mailer. You send it to approximately 200,000 voters in your Los Angeles district. The mailer list candidates you endorse. Local candidates, state candidates, sometimes statewide officials. Those candidates pay your campaign to appear on the mailer. The money comes in from the candidates. Your campaign sends the mailer, and your campaign pays your daughter to manage the operation. Representative, you are the only federal politician in America running a slate mailer operation at the congressional level. No other member of Congress does this. Not one, because no other member of Congress has figured out how to turn their endorsement into a revenue stream that pays their daughter. Waters' hands, the hands that had pounded tables in committee rooms for 35 years, the hands that had pointed at witnesses and waved gavels and directed the particular energy of a woman who had been the loudest person in every room she had ever entered, rested on the table with a stillness that was not natural to them. The stillness was new, the stillness of hands that have been informed by the brain that the hearing has begun and that pounding tables will not help. The committee's analysts examined the economics of the slate mailer operation. Specifically, we asked, what does it actually cost to produce and mail 200,000 endorsement mailers? He pulled the analysis. Commercial printing and mailing services in the Los Angeles market. The committee obtained quotes from 3 vendors, charged between 32 and 44 cents per piece for a mailer of comparable size and format. The average is 38 cents. Your campaign pays your daughter $1.20 per mailer. He placed the 2 numbers side by side on the desk. 38 cents, $1.20. 38 cents is the market rate. $1.20 is the family rate. The difference is 82 cents per mailer. Over 20 years, your campaign sent approximately 1 million mailers. 82 cents times 1 million is $820,000. Waters' jaw, the jaw that had delivered "Reclaim My Time" to a room full of cameras, the jaw that had been set in the position of combat for 35 years, tightened. Not the quick clench of anger, the slow lock of a jaw that has received a number it was not expecting. Not the $1.2 million, she knew that number. The 82 cents, the per mailer overpayment, the granularity, the 38 cents versus $1.20. Nobody had done that math before. Nobody had compared her daughter's rate to the market rate. Nobody had calculated the per unit overpayment and multiplied it by volume. $820,000 in overpayment to your daughter, representative, over 20 years for a service that any commercial vendor could have provided at 1/3 the cost. But the overpayment is only half the story, Representative. The other half is who's paying to be on the mailer. The committee examined the source of funds flowing into your slate mailer operation. Local candidates, city council, school board, county supervisor, pay your campaign between $500 and $5,000 each to appear on the mailer. They're buying your endorsement, not your campaign's endorsement, your endorsement. Maxine Waters says, vote for this person, and the person pays to be on the paper that says it. The committee's analysts identified 247 candidates who paid to appear on your slate mailers between 2004 and 2024. Total payments received approximately $1.8 million. Of that $1.8 million, $1.2 million, 67% was paid to your daughter's company. 67% of the revenue generated by your endorsement goes to your daughter representative. That's not a campaign operation. That's a franchise. You are the brand. Your daughter is the franchisee. And the local candidates are the customers. And here's the part that concerns me most, Representative. 31 of the 247 candidates who paid to appear on your mailer subsequently received your endorsement in competitive races. The committee could not determine whether the payment influenced the endorsement or the endorsement motivated the payment. But the correlation, pay to appear, then receive endorsement, raises a question that the committee believes deserves examination. Waters' left hand, the hand that had been resting on the table in unfamiliar stillness, began to tap, not rhythmically, arrhythmically. The involuntary percussion of a hand that has been told to be still and is failing. The way a lid fails to contain boiling water, not by explosion, but by the steady escape of energy that has no other outlet. The tapping was small, 2 fingers against the table surface. The sound was not audible to the gallery. It was visible on the C-SPAN close-up camera. 2 fingers tapping against wood, the body's first unauthorized motion in 20 minutes. Now, I want to be fair. Family members can work for campaigns. It's legal. Many campaigns employ family members. The question is not whether it's legal. The question is whether the price is fair and whether the operation creates a system where your endorsement becomes a revenue stream for your family. 38 cents is fair. $1.20 is family. And the 247 candidates who paid to be on the mailer, they weren't paying for paper and postage, they were paying for your name. And your name is not a campaign service. Your name is a public trust, and your daughter charges $1.20 per unit for it. Representative, in a classroom, when a student turns in work and pays their sibling to grade it, we call that a conflict of interest. When a congresswoman turns campaign donations into payments to her daughter at 3 times the market rate and sells her endorsement to 247 candidates whose payments fund those overpayments, I'm not sure what the political word is, but the math is the same. He turned to the second tab. The tab was labeled Sidney. Representative, your husband, Sidney Williams, served on the board of directors of One United Bank, a minority-owned bank based in Boston. He held investments in the bank valued at more than $350,000 as of June 2008. In September 2008, as the financial crisis escalated, One United was on the verge of collapse. Your husband's $350,000 investment was in danger of becoming worthless. You arranged a meeting between executives from One United and other minority-owned banks and officials at the United States Treasury Department. Waters' hands, the hands that had been still since the hearing began, the unfamiliar stillness moved. The left hand migrated to the right forearm, not gripping, resting on it. The unconscious positioning of one limb on another. That happens when a body needs contact with itself. The way a person crosses their arms, not for warmth, but for structure. 3 months after that meeting, One United received $12 million in TARP bailout funds. The committee's analyst examined where One United ranked among TARP recipients. He read from the analysis, the Troubled Asset Relief Program was created, in Treasury Secretary Paulson's words, for healthy institutions. Of the 987 banks that received TARP money between October 2008 and December 2009, One United had the lowest Tier 1 capital ratio, 1.8%, the lowest of 987 banks. Your husband's bank was the single weakest institution to receive bailout funds in the entire program. 986 banks were healthier. Your husband's bank got $12 million anyway. And I want the committee to understand what kind of bank One United was, because this was not a well-run bank that had bad luck in October 2008. 2 months before the bailout, federal regulators issued a cease and desist order against One United for unsound banking practices and excessive executive compensation. The bank's executives had used depositor funds to purchase a 2008 Porsche and to pay for a beachfront housing allowance in Santa Monica, California. A Porsche and a beach house paid for by depositors at a bank your husband sat on the board of, at a bank that received $12 million in taxpayer bailout money 3 months after you arranged a Treasury meeting. The bailout money has not been repaid. As of the committee's last check, One United still owes the United States Treasury $12 million. Representative, your husband's investment was worth $350,000. If One United had failed, as it should have, given that it was the weakest bank in the program with a cease and desist order for buying Porsches with depositor money, your husband's $350,000 would have been worthless. The $12 million TARP bailout saved your husband's investment, not the bank's depositors who were already being harmed by executive mismanagement, your husband's investment. The House Ethics Committee charged you on 3 counts, improperly using your office to help a bank in which your husband had a financial stake. Representative Barney Frank, your colleague, the chairman of the Financial Services Committee, a Democrat, told you it was a conflict of interest problem. He advised you to, and I'm quoting, stay out of it. He pulled the Ethics Committee document. Your chief of staff, your grandson, Mikael Moore, continued to communicate with One United officials after you were advised to stop. Emails from Moore to Financial Services Committee staff referenced legislation that contained provisions specifically designed to help One United. Chairman Frank told you to stop. Your grandson kept going. The ethics case was dismissed on procedural grounds. I want to be clear about that. Procedural grounds, not on the merits, not because you were found innocent. Because new documents, including an email from your grandson that investigators had not previously reviewed, created procedural complications that required the case to be reset, and it was never retried. Representative, a case dismissed on procedure is not an acquittal, it is an untried case. The charges were never adjudicated, the question was never answered, and the $12 million was never repaid. Waters' left hand pressed harder against her right forearm. The pressure was visible in the whitening of the fingers, not dramatic, not the knuckle-white grip of previous antagonists, but the steady compression of a hand that is holding an arm the way a person holds something they are afraid of losing. The arm was not going anywhere. The holding was not physical. It was psychological. The body seeking contact with itself because the room was not providing contact with anything else. Representative, your daughter receives $1.2 million for mailers. Your husband's bank receives $12 million for a Porsche and a beach house. I'm seeing a pattern. The pattern is your family receives money from your position, and the money, whether it's campaign money or taxpayer money, always flows in the same direction inward. He turned to the third tab. The tab was labeled Mika. Representative, your chief of staff is Mikael Moore, your grandson. He has run your congressional office for over a decade. He manages your staff, your schedule, your legislative agenda, and your communications. He is also the person who, according to the Ethics Committee's investigation, continued to advocate for One United Bank after you were advised by Chairman Frank to stop. The emails are in the record. Your daughter manages your campaign. Your husband benefited from your official actions. Your grandson manages your office. He set 3 documents side by side: Karen's payments, Sydney's bank bailout, Mika's emails. Representative, this is not a congressional office. This is a family business. The daughter runs the revenue. The husband receives the bailout. The grandson runs the operations. And the family business operates from a home address that is not in your district. He pulled a property record. You live in a home in Hancock Park, Los Angeles. The home is valued at approximately $4.5 million. Hancock Park is not in California's 43rd congressional district. Your district includes Watts, Englewood, South Los Angeles, neighborhoods where the median household income is $36,000. Waters' body shifted, the shift of a woman who has been sitting in the posture of endurance for 30 minutes, and whose endurance, while vast, is encountering a subject she cannot endure with stillness. The mansion, the address, the geography of where she lives versus where her voters live. She had been asked about it before. She had answered before, I have a right to live where I choose. The answer was legally correct. It was politically devastating. And Johnson had not yet asked the question, which meant she could not deploy the answer, which meant the answer sat inside her like a loaded weapon waiting for a trigger that had not been pulled. $4.5 million, your home in a neighborhood where the median home costs $2.3 million. $380,000, the median home value in your district. Your home costs 11.8 times the median home in the district you represent, and your home is not in the district you represent. The committee prepared a comparison that I think tells the story better than any number. He pulled a map, a committee-prepared overlay showing Waters' home address in Hancock Park and her district boundary. Your home is here, he pointed. Hancock Park, tree-lined streets, craftsman homes, private security patrols. The median household income in your neighborhood is $186,000. Your district is here. He pointed to the other section. Watts, Englewood, South Los Angeles. The median household income is $36,000. The distance between your home and the nearest point of your district is approximately 3 miles. 3 miles, Representative. 3 miles and $150,000 in median income. That's the distance between where you live and where your voters live. And the committee examined one more number. Over the past 20 years, your campaign paid your family, your daughter primarily, but including other family-related payments, approximately $1.4 million. During that same period, the committee estimated that your district office processed constituent services, casework, Social Security assistance, immigration help, housing complaints, at a rate comparable to other California offices. $1.4 million to your family. $36,000 is what the families in your district earn in a year. Your family received the equivalent of 39 years of median district income from your campaign. 39 years of what a family in Watts makes. That is what your endorsement is worth to your daughter. That is what your position is worth to your family. He placed the property comparison beside the family documents. 4 tabs opened, 4 family members or assets on the desk. Representative, your campaign paid a $68,000 FEC fine in June 2025 for violating campaign finance laws. failing to accurately report receipts and disbursements, knowingly accepting excessive contributions, $19,000 from 7 donors, making prohibited cash disbursements, $7,000 in cash payments over $100, $68,000 in fines. Your daughter received $1.2 million. The fine is 5.6% of what your daughter was paid. That's not a penalty, Representative. That's a processing fee. That's the cost of doing business. And the business, the family business, paid it and moved on. Waters' chin, the chin that had been set in the position of defiance since her opening statement. The anti-Maxine chin, the chin that had stared down every Republican since Newt Gingrich held the gavel, but the chin was doing what chins do when they hold too long. It was working the muscles beneath it. The mentalis, the small muscle that controls the chin surface, were firing at a frequency that produced a microtremor, not visible to the gallery, visible on the C-SPAN close-up camera. The tremor was the frequency of a muscle that has been maintaining a position for 35 minutes and is running out of the particular fuel that muscles use to maintain positions they were not designed to hold indefinitely. Johnson turned to the final tab. The tab was not labeled with a name. It was labeled CA43. Johnson's voice changed, lower, warmer. The pastor's register, the voice he used when he was about to ask the question that mattered more than all the questions before it. Representative, you told me you answer to your constituents. 18 elections, 35 years, they chose you 18 times. That is trust, that is faith. And faith, as I know from my own life, imposes obligations on the person who receives it. So let me ask about the people who gave you that faith. Your daughter received $1.2 million from your campaign. What did your constituents receive? Your husband's bank received $12 million in TARP bailout. What did your constituents receive? Your grandson received a decade of chief of staff's salary. What did your constituents receive? Your campaign paid $68,000 in FEC fines. What did your constituents receive? In 35 years, your family has received millions from your position in Congress. Millions. Your daughter is a millionaire from your campaign. Your husband's investment was saved by a $12 million bailout you helped arrange. Your grandson has drawn a federal salary from your office for over a decade, and you live in a $4.5 million home that is not in the district whose voters made all of this possible. He looked at her, the teacher's look, the look that precedes the grade. Representative CA 43, your district. Watts, Inglewood, South Los Angeles. Median household income, $36,000. Economic hardship rate, 22%. Community safety incidents, among the highest in Los Angeles. High school graduation rate, among the lowest in California. Let me give the committee some context for those numbers, because numbers without people are just numbers. A family making $36,000 in Watts, after taxes, after rent, after groceries, has approximately $200 per month in discretionary income. $200. That's what's left after the bills. That $200 pays for everything else: the child's school supplies, the car repair, the medical copay, the birthday present. $200. Your daughter received $192,300 from your campaign in the 2022 cycle alone. In one election cycle, your daughter received from your campaign what a family in your district earns in 5.3 years. A woman in Watts, let me call her Mrs. Johnson, because I don't want to use a real name. Mrs. Johnson works 2 jobs, cafeteria at the school in the morning, laundromat in the afternoon. Her husband drives a bus for Metro. Together, they make $41,000 a year. They have 3 children. The oldest is applying to community college. The application fee is $70. Mrs. Johnson had to wait 2 weeks to pay it because $70 is 35% of the monthly discretionary income. $70 for a college application. Your daughter received $192,300 in one cycle. That's 2,747 college applications, Representative. That's what your campaign paid your daughter instead of, or in addition to, whatever it might have spent on the constituents those campaign donations were supposed to serve. In 35 years, Representative, 35 years of your representation, those numbers have not changed. The economic hardship rate in your district is within 2 points of where it was when you took office in 1991. The median income, adjusted for inflation, has barely moved. The crime rate has fluctuated but not fallen. The schools have not improved. Your family got richer, your district stayed struggling, and the distance between the two, between $4.5 million in Hancock Park and $36,000 in Watts, grew every year, every election cycle, every mailer, every payment to Karen. Every year the distance got wider and the district stayed the same. The question, Representative, in 35 years, what did they get? Not your family. Your family did very well. I've documented that. Your constituents, the 718,000 people in CA 43, the people who voted for you 18 times, the people who believed for 35 years that sending you to Congress would change something in their lives. What did they get? Because I can tell you what your daughter got, $1.2 million. I can tell you what your husband got, a $12 million bailout for his bank. I can tell you what your grandson got, a career. What did the family in Watts get? The family making $36,000? The family that can't afford to visit your neighborhood, let alone live in it. What did they get, Representative? Maxine Waters, the woman who had survived everything, who had outlasted every speaker, who had told the country to reclaim my time and had the phrase printed on T-shirts, sat in silence. The silence was not the combative silence of a fighter, or the frozen silence of a prosecutor, or the polished silence of a governor. It was the old silence. The silence of a woman who has been in the building so long that the building has become her home. And the question, what did they get, is asking her to look at the distance between her home and theirs and admit that the distance has not changed in 35 years and that the family business is the reason. Her chin, the anti-Maxine chin, the defiance chin, the chin that had been trembling at a frequency visible only on C-SPAN, dropped. Not dramatically. The chin of a 6-year-old woman does not drop dramatically. It lowers the way a flag lowers when the wind stops, slowly, without sound, the lowering of something that had been held up by force and is now being held up by nothing. Because from where I teach, and I am a teacher, Representative, before everything else I am a teacher, from where I teach, the purpose of representation is not to represent your family, it's to represent the people who can't represent themselves. The people in Watts who can't afford a lobbyist, the people in Englewood who can't afford $1.20 per mailer, the people in South LA who can't afford to visit Hancock Park. They sent you to Congress 18 times, and you built a family business. The daughter got paid, the husband got bailed out, the grandson got hired, and the district got 35 more years of $36,000. He closed the binder, pen and spine. That's the final grade, Representative, and I wish it were better. No further questions. Waters responded. Of course she responded. Maxine Waters had been responding to Republicans for 35 years, and the response was as much a part of her identity as the district she represented. Her response was 2 minutes and 16 seconds. She called the hearing a targeted attack on a black woman who has spent her entire career fighting for communities that this Congress has abandoned. She mentioned the Community Reinvestment Act. She mentioned her work on the Financial Services Committee. She mentioned the $12 billion in housing assistance she had helped secure for underserved communities. She mentioned that family employment in campaigns was legal and common. She mentioned that she had been reelected 18 times and that her voters know exactly who I am. Her voters did know who she was. The question was not who she was. The question was what they got. And the response, 2 minutes of credentials in history and legal justifications, did not contain a single metric about what had changed in Watts, Englewood, or South Los Angeles in 35 years of her representation. Because the metrics hadn't changed, and the metrics were on the desk, Johnson did not react. He had closed the binder, pen and spine, the teacher's clothes. He stood, buttoned his jacket. He did not look at Waters on his way out. The first clip to break was 38 cents, verse 1, $1.20. Johnson reading the per-mailer cost comparison between the market rate and Karen Waters' rate. The clip was 11 seconds long. It was shared 22 million times in the first 24 hours. The clip's power was in its granularity, not $1.2 million to her daughter, a number people had heard before, but 82 cents overpayment per mailer times 1 million mailers. The per-unit math was new. The per-unit math made the abstract concrete. 82 cents per mailer, a million mailers. The calculator was the weapon. The second clip was the weakest bank. Johnson reading One United's Tier 1 capital ratio, 1.8%, lowest of 987 TARP recipients, while noting that the program was designed for healthy institutions. This clip traveled through banking communities, through TARP accountability organizations, through the particular ecosystem of people who had been asking since 2008 how the weakest bank in America had received bailout money. Johnson's clip gave them the answer they had suspected, because the weakest bank's board member was married to a congresswoman. The third clip was 11.8 times. The property comparison between Waters' $4.5 million Hancock Park mansion and the $380,000 median home in her district. The clip was shared not as political content, but as class content. The number 11.8, the ratio of her home to her constituents' homes, became the shorthand for the hearing. The fourth clip was, what did they get? 12 seconds of silence after Johnson's question, ending with the lowering of the chin. The clip was the quietest in the series. Not the eruption of a debate audience, not the tension of a presidential hearing, the quiet of an 6-year-old woman being asked by a teacher what 35 years of representation had produced for the people she represented. And the answer, the 12 seconds of nothing, was the loudest silence in the series, because the silence was not about what she couldn't say, it was about what she couldn't claim. The FEC expanded its investigation of the slate mailer operation. Progressive Connections, Karen Waters' company, was subpoenaed for financial records, vendor contracts, and printing invoices. The investigation would determine whether the $1.20 per mailer rate constituted excessive payment to a related party. The 38-cent comparison was now in the FEC's file. The House Ethics Committee reopened the One United matter, not the original charges which had been dismissed on procedure, but a new inquiry examining whether additional information presented at the May 2026 hearing, including the Tier 1 capital comparison and the timeline of communications between Representative Waters' office and One United, warranted renewed examination. A primary challenger in CA 43, the first serious challenger in 2 decades, reported $2.1 million in fundraising in the 3 weeks following the hearing. The challenger was endorsed by 4 community organizations in Watts and Englewood. The endorsements were significant not because of their size, but because of their source. Organizations that had been aligned with Waters for decades were now aligned against her. The organization's joint statement read, "We need a representative who represents us, not a family business." Waters' Reclaim My Time brand underwent a transformation that her communications team could not reverse. The phrase, which had been a progressive rallying cry, was now followed in every social media mention by the response. She reclaimed it for her family. The brand inversion was complete. Reclaim My Time no longer meant what it had meant. For 8 years, it meant $1.2 million to a daughter, $12 million to a husband's bank, and 35 years of $36,000. Johnson gave no interviews. When a reporter caught him in the Capitol hallway, he stopped, adjusted his glasses. I was a teacher for a long time. The hardest grade I ever gave was not to a student who tried and failed. It was to a student who never tried, who spent years in the classroom and left without learning anything. He paused. 35 years, $36,000. That's not a grade. That's a permanent record. In Madisonville, Louisiana, Gerald Thibodeau stood behind the counter of the bait shop. The television was on. Boudreaux called, Gerald said. The Tuesday regular waited. Boudreaux said, if a man opens a bait shop and hires his wife, his son, and his cousin, and the bait shop never sells any bait, and the fish in the lake are still hungry, and the customers still can't catch anything, it's not a bait shop, it's a family reunion with a cash register. He bagged the shiners, 35 years. The daughters paid, the husbands bailed out, the grandsons hired, and the fish are still hungry. In Middletown, Ohio, Crystal Atkins sat in the break room of the Brighter Days Recovery Center. The television was on. Donna was there. This one is the oldest story in the series, Crystal said. 35 years. The others were about things that happened recently. Deception, fires, trades, lies. This one is about something that happened slowly. So slowly, nobody noticed. She looked at the screen, Johnson closing the binder. $1.2 million to the daughter. $12 million to the husband's bank, the grandson running the office, the mansion outside the district. None of that happened overnight. It happened over 35 years. A payment here, a meeting there, a hire here, a house there. Each one small enough to explain, each one legal enough to defend, and the total over 35 years is a family business that operates inside the United States Congress. She paused. You know what this reminds me of? The people in my group room. Dependency doesn't happen overnight. It happens one decision at a time. One drink, one pill, one more. Each one small enough to explain, each one followed by a reason. And the total over years is a life that doesn't look like the life the person planned. I don't think Maxine Waters planned to build a family business. I think she planned to represent Watts. But somewhere along the way, one payment, one meeting, one hire, one house, the plan changed, and the district didn't change with it. The district stayed at $36,000, and the family went to $4.5 million. That's the distance, same distance as every other story, the distance between the people who serve and the people they're supposed to serve. But this one took 35 years to measure, and the measurement is the saddest one in the series, because 35 years is a career, and a career that produces $1.2 million for your daughter and $36,000 for your constituents is not a career in public service, it's a career in family service. She rinsed her cup, hot water, no soap, upside down in the rack. She walked back to the group room. The television played on in the empty break room. In 35 years, what did they get, Representative? 12 seconds. $1.2 million to the daughter, $12 million to the husband, $36,000 to the district. That's not a grade. That's a permanent record. The screen cut to commercial. If you made it this far, you just watched a teacher open a binder with 5 tabs, one for each member of a family that has been operating inside the United States Congress for 35 years, and grade every one of them. The daughter, $1.2 million for mailers that cost 38 cents to print. The husband, $12 million in bailout money for the weakest bank in America. The grandson, a decade of running the office. The mansion, $4.5 million outside the district. The district, $36,000 unchanged. Smash that like button if Mike Johnson reminded you that the difference between public service and family service is where the money goes. Subscribe for more stories where binders beat brands and 38 cents beats $1.20. Share this with everyone who has ever heard "reclaim my time" and wondered, reclaim it for whom? But here is the real question for you to debate. When a 3